right, sports fans, here we go. Listen, like, dislike, don't like, subscribe, whatever you're going to do. Don't be a lazy piece of shit. Do something. First thing I want to talk about is my future son-in-law has made it a point to tell me that his favorite part of the podcast is when I drink coffee. I disagree. Don't get me wrong. He's a hell of a lot better looking than me, but he's not as smart as me. The best part of the podcast is actually drinking a damn cup of coffee, so stand by. Oh, that's good fucking coffee. All right. I went back and listened to the podcast for several reasons. My old podcast, I meant to say, not my current podcast, but older ones, and even the last one. I do it for several reasons. First of all, I've been told I have the voice of Celine Dion and the poetic justice of William Shakespeare. So I'm also very modest, if you can't tell. But no, I listen to this shit to see, is there something we could be improving on, something else we could have added, something we might have missed. And the last podcast, as much as I think it was extremely important, we basically did an overhead look at what happens in an emergency the first 24 hours. I realize we're coming up on spring, but as I've said before, and I'll say again, if you live in Cleveland, it could be snowing in July. So let's go over fire, shelter, and energy basics. This is all cold weather related. So I know it's late. I don't care. Save it for next year. I don't care. Stick it in your ear. I don't care what you do with it, but I would feel really guilty if I don't do this podcast now. We do still have some cold weather coming up where I live, so if it helps, it helps. If it doesn't, it should be a good listen. But this is information you should know, and it's going to be telling you something you should be practicing if you have a MAG, or even if you just want to practice it with your family. I know one of the gentlemen I've worked with in the past was getting very into this. You know who you are. His wife bought in with all this stuff, and they are practicing, and he's talked about practicing with his kids. His youngest is a rock and roller at heart, so I love him already, and I haven't even met him. But let's go over this. We're going to be covering fire, shelter, and energy basics. This is something that, I'm not going to call them idiots because they're overly anxious to get into prepping and surviving, but you guys got to start getting in your head that all the equipment in the world isn't going to save your life if you don't know how to use it, if you don't test it, if you don't practice with it, and if you don't get everybody involved with it, practicing with it. Practicing with cold weather gear in June is like the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard of. You actually have to practice with cold weather gear in the cold. You want to practice with hydration and shit, and cooling body temperatures down and stuff. You want to try it. Go out and cut the grass, and then have everybody come around this training with you. Take your body temperature, your body core temperature, your skin temperature, and then start pouring water on you and fanning it, and then see how much it brings your temperature down. Practice this shit. The more you practice it, the more natural it will become in a time of a crisis. Anything you might have to do, you should be practicing, even if you think you know how. That doesn't mean everybody in your group knows how. And I got off subject again, so let's go back to fire, shelter, and energy basics. This is a topic that is assumed, and most often assumed wrong. We really cannot be thrust into a freezing cold situation with the ferro rod, new boots, and simply survive in the wilderness. In fact, I've seen ferro rod misused, I should say, more times than any other survival tool. Now, I've spoke about this before, but I've watched these morons thinking they can just grab a ferro rod and a blanket and survive in the cold without even knowing how to use a ferro rod. I'm going to tell you how to do it. Let's just set this straight. You pull that nice new ferro rod out that you've never even used before, that you think is your key to survival, and you look at it and it's all black and ready to go. Wrong. You got to get the black off of it before you can actually get it to spark. So for all you rocket scientists out there that struck the ferro rod while it had that black coating on it and you couldn't get a spark, it's not the ferro rod's fault. It's the idiot trying to use it. Clear all the black off. Use some sandpaper, use some steel wool. I don't give a shit what you use. get all the black off of it, and then put it back in your pack. It's only there for shipping to protect it. Do not take a ferro rod out into an emergency situation with that black on it and think you're going to clean it when you need to use it. Seconds count in cold weather. You need to get fire started. But let's go back into this. Don't depend on a ferro rod. Carry a couple lighters. Don't make your own fire starter shit, with Vaseline and cotton. Carry a couple fire starter logs, the little bricks for starting a fire. Duct tape is excellent to start a fire. You roll it in a little ball. Even if you have a plastic tent peg, scraped, shaved pieces of plastic tent peg in a little, piece of foil or something like that, and start that on fire, and then use that to light your wood. That shit burns hot and it burns long. And you can still use a tent peg if you're not an idiot and you know how to carve, shave the plastic off of it. I'm not a big user of tents. I prefer tarps and lean-tos, but to each their own. If you're the leader of your mag group or your family, either or, you need to exude confidence. You cannot look confused all the time, because people are going to lose confidence in you. They're not going to follow you, and you don't know a problem until you're in an emergency situation. You're freezing cold, and nobody's talking to nobody. Nobody's listening to anybody. Everybody's trying to do their own thing. It's like herding cats. You really need to know more than just how to open a package of cold weather gear and put it in your pack. You really need to make yourself familiar with it. Nothing in this podcast assumes you were under duress of a combat scenario. This would change things significantly. This is all just cold weather training. Don't be assuming bullets are going to be whizzing overhead while you're doing this, all right? We're just talking about basic cold weather training. Like I said, I understand that the last podcast was an overview of a crisis. It was informational, but in the time of a true crisis, when the weather is not so friendly, say 14 degrees at night, you need to know what to do to keep warm if the grid goes down. This works in your house. This doesn't matter where it is. You have to have a plan. Even more, while I detest the idea of bugging out, you need to know about fire, warmth, and just how to survive safely. Too many times preppers, or I digress, the better prepared persons get focused on ferro rods, like I said, without even truly knowing how to use them, and other survival gear that you have to practice with. Or some people, it's happened. I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard about it. They get these nice stoves, these nice, Coleman stoves, and they try to light them, They don't even know they got to put a fuel bottle on them. I think they just think they miraculously work somehow. I've never seen it, but I have heard about it. A 0-degree sleeping bag is fine, but what happens when you get out of that sleeping bag? You're going to be sweaty, and you're going to be going out in the 10-degree weather, and you're going to get hypothermia. All this gear is useful, but you need to be knowledgeable on how to use it. Never assume any piece of gear you're putting in your pack, on your person, or even using for grid down in your house. Never assume you know how to use it. Take it out of the packaging and learn how to use it. I go as far as redundancy. If I have my 3-day pack on, I will have web gear on under that 3-day pack with a complete survival system in the small pack at the bottom on my web gear. Redundancy is key. So even in your house, you have that bag, you're going to have blankets. You're going to have some form of safe indoor heat, whether it's, they make these safe buddy, I think they call them buddy heaters. They're safe to use with a fuel can, but now you need to be careful how you store that fuel can, and you need to be careful about getting stuff too close to it. There's so many times when there are power outages and people are using kerosene heaters or whatever, and they actually start fires in their houses. Now, yes, they will get warm, but the downside is it's only as long as the fuel from the wood and the fire burns. They're going to be cold real quick. This is even worse if you're out in the field. I see people sleeping with their, falling asleep in a chair with their feet over the fire when they're camping, their feet near the fire or whatever. If you've ever been near a real campfire, what's the one thing wood tends to do when it burns? It pops. It sends arcs of ember out. You don't know where they're going to go. It's not like you can predict. If you've got socks on and they're dry and that thing hits it, it's going to go in the fire. If you're asleep, you're not going to realize that sock was on fire until you've cooked the bottom of your foot. This is all information you need to keep in mind when you're working with fire. People take fires for granted. I'm a 25-year firefighter. I can tell you most fires could have been prevented because people are stupid. People think they can get away with shit that they've been told not to do, that they think they can outthink a fire. I will tell you, by every definition, a fire is a living thing. It consumes, it discharges, and it reproduces. It is alive. You're not going to outthink a fire. It will take over before you have a clue what's going on. So let's move on. Start to comprehend. Survival is a matter of energy management. Think about it. The human body must maintain a stable internal temperature in order to function. When the environmental conditions disrupt that balance, whether it's cold, wind, moisture, or heat, the body begins to lose ability to operate effectively. If that process is not interrupted, it leads to physical and cognitive failure. What this means is a stressful situation, when we are truly neck deep in a shit hits the fan scenario, we need to function at our best. If we are sweating or freezing, our collective asses off, and we are doing nothing to get our core temperatures to where they need to be, we're going to make really bad decisions. This is bad enough if we are by ourselves, but if we are leading a mag, this could be catastrophic. Now, there's purposes for fire beyond warmth, okay? And most of it's, as much as fire is used for warmth, it's also for psychological advantages. This is, again, it's not under a time of duress. You're not being followed by the bad guys. The Russians aren't looking for you in the woods like in what's that movie? Red Dawn. You're just trying to stay alive right now. You're trying to keep your mag alive or your family alive. Your house burned down. Like I said, there was a natural disaster. You might have had to move out of the city. There might have been big fires burning in the city, and a place in the woods you like to camp, and you try to get there with your car because you were a good little camper, and you keep at least half a tank of gas in your car, and you think, well, we can get up there, we can set up, give stuff time to calm down, especially if, there's a big fire, FEMA's going to come out. They'll try to do what they can, but I myself would rather camp in the woods than live in a FEMA camp. So if you tend to go that route, let's assume that, okay? Again, the purpose of fire beyond warmth, and this is where it's going to come into play. That's why, hold on, coffee time. Oh my God, that's good coffee. Say you move out to the woods, say for whatever reason, and this is one of the things we prepare for. It's not that it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I pray it doesn't happen. But say some situation deems that we got to move out of the city and we got to take to the woods, and if you've listened to anything I've ever done, bugging out is my last option. Bugging out almost isn't an option, even though I'm prepared for it. I don't like that, but let's just say we have to take that route, or, sometimes it's beyond our control. Short of an earthquake, I can't really think of anything that would cause you to have to bug out that far, but let's just go with it, because if we don't talk about it, you don't know what to do. Let's go back to the purpose of fire beyond warmth. Fire is commonly associated with warmth, but its role in survival extends far beyond simple heat generation, but it really does. It is a multifunctional tool that directs support beyond physical survival and psychological stability. This is important. People when people prepare, these preppers out there, a lot of the preppers online even, and I don't mean to bash everybody, because some people's hearts are in the right place, but in their mind, these people honestly think, if I got the gear, if I got the MREs, if I got a gun, I'm going to live in the woods. I'm going to pack the kids up with a shit ton of MREs and flashlights and coloring books. And we're going to take a bunch of Cheerios with us so they got something to snack on. We're going to be fine because we got the gear. And they've never practiced. And their kids have never worn a pack. And they get out there and one of their kids has one sneaker on and one flip-flop on. This is what I'm talking about, okay? Especially in the cold. Shit's going to go south real fast if you're not prepared. Practice like, fight like you train like you fight, prepare for the worst, whatever you want to call it. So, fire. In a warm situation, in a cold situation, a prepared, controlled fire. That's for all you pyros out there. A controlled fire, not a light the city on fire, but a very controlled fire. One of the most immediate effects of the fire is psychological more than physical. Preppers in survival situations often experience a lot of panic, especially if you got 4 kids running in different direction. Your wife's throwing rocks at you because she didn't want to leave the city or whatever. And this panic is ensuing because nobody's practiced. Nobody's done anything. They don't understand the evolution of the process of getting in, setting up, stabilizing. They don't understand it because you've never practiced it with them, and that is your fault. Of course, during this phase of massive panic, it leads to poor decision making because now you're stressed out. You're going to waste energy and you're all at increased risk. Establishing a fire almost immediately, if there's no life-threatening things going on, introduces structure and control in an otherwise uncertain environment. This shift in a mindset could significantly improve decision making and overall survival outcomes. I mean, let's be honest, you've been driving for 4-6 hours, you get to a place, you get up a fire going, kids are all kicking rocks and pissing and moaning and, this and that. You give them a stick and a marshmallow, all of a sudden you're a hero. So work with me on this. The fire adding a positive psychological effect, and this is for all you knuckle draggers out there, you need to understand this, can bring a mag under control and introduce stability in a bad situation, probably quicker than hot macaroni and cheese. You need to get that fire. Well, macaroni and cheese would do a lot, though. But let's just stick with the fire. Oh, man, now I want macaroni and cheese. Let's step away from the fire survival thing for a moment and discuss whoever is leading a mag in a truly stressful situation, and that's you. If you're listening to this, you're probably leading a mag or your family, or even if it's just yourself. If you're leading yourself or a mag in any kind of disaster, it's going to be like herding cats if you have not practiced survival situations, like I said before. Bro, and when I say bro, that includes broettes. It's everybody. You have to practice cold weather survival in the cold, like I said before. In the middle of summer, and the opposite. You have to practice warm weather survival in the heat. You can't be doing this in temperate weather or weather where all you need to wear is a sweatshirt and you can still be in shorts. You need to practice lighting a fire where your hands are shivering, where you're cold and you can see your breath. That's the time to practice lighting a fire, not when you're drinking a beer just to stay cool. I mean, ideally that would be great, but that's not the time to practice survival. Cold weather survival must be practiced in cold weather. I'm not even going to I'm going to graze across warm weather stuff, but that'll be another podcast. You have to practice with the gear that you will actually be using. Don't be using somebody else's. Don't be using a spare pair. Don't be, use the stuff and then put it back in your pack. Okay, the stuff you will actually be using. You don't know that one ferro rod that you haven't practiced with yet is even going to work until you use it. So practice it. Practice with the stuff you're going to be using. You can use a ferro rod hundreds of times. Don't worry about using it up if you start one fire. But if you're going to be using a ferro rod, use it. Even if you're not going to primarily be using a ferro rod, what the hell? You're out in the cold. Practice it. But the other thing I want you to do is I want you to practice starting a fire with a lighter, just to see how difficult it can be to get a working fire. I mean, yeah, you can light kindling on fire any idiot can light kindling on fire. Try to get a good fire going in an extreme cold situation, even with a lighter. I dare you. You will be surprised. And then you want to think you're going to start a fire with the ferro rod? You're a freaking idiot. You have to build confidence in your gear, which will greatly help control the situation if you're thrust into a real oh shit situation. Let people see you practicing with it, the people that are going to be depending on you, so they know you're practicing. It builds an incredible amount of confidence. You can lead better with confidence than you can with confusion. You always need to remember that. People know you're confused. They're not going to listen to you. People know your confidence. They're going to give you an ear. So remember that. Confidence over confusion. All right? That's a gift. I can speak from experience of cold weather training in the Marines. It took almost everything we had after extensive training to push on after the first week of isolated and continued training in 2 feet of snow and freezing temperatures. Marines don't get to go inside for hot chocolate when they get cold. We sack up and go on. The only thing that keeps you going sometimes is your gear that you have trained extensively with and the confidence shown by NCOs and people in charge. That wouldn't be the LTs or the captains, because they're sitting somewhere in a snowcat with the heater on. We're the ones out fighting in the cold. We train. We survive. So keep that in mind as you go on. This is coming from someone that's actually went through cold weather training more than once. I can tell you I don't like it. I can tell you I hate the cold. I can tell you I hate snow. But I know how to survive in it, and I will. Fire also plays a critical role in water safety. In many environments, water sources may appear clean, but you thought I was talking about swimming. In many environments, water sources may appear clean, but contain harmful microorganisms. Boiling water in a fire, a proper container, don't use a plastic fucking cup, but boiling water can make hydration safe and sustainable. Let it cool off before you drink it. I know you're thinking you don't have to tell me that, but somebody out there I have to say that for, because someone burned their mouth on a hot apple pie and sued McDonald's because they didn't know it was hot. The hot apple pie that they ordered as a hot apple pie didn't know it was hot, and they burned their mouth. So McDonald's got sued. Just like that idiot that burned their mouth with the coffee, and they sued McDonald's because their hot coffee was hot. So I have to say it, okay? In addition, fire will enable food processing. Now, I've already talked about don't cook food if you're in a duress situation, if the bad guys are around or whatever, because smell travels further than anything else, or at least it's a good way to zero in on your location, I should say. This is a situation where you want to be cooking food. You don't want to be taking anything in cold. Your body core temperature is already cold. You want to introduce heat wherever possible. You can't eat a fire, so you want to eat hot food. Again, fire bad to eat. Okay? We're clear on that? Cooking improves digestibility and caloric absorption while reducing the risk of foodborne illness. In a survival context, maximizing energy gain from a food is essential. Not just calories. You want to be taking heat in, okay? And I know, you can argue calories are heat and blah, blah. Hot food, good. Cold food, bad. I'm talking to grunts now. Fire also serves as a signaling tool. Smoke during daylight hours is visible, and a visible flame at night. Both are visible from good distances. Attract attention and increase likelihood of rescue if you're like, oh shit, we've been out here too long and it's still snowing, we need help. Finally, fire provides a degree of protection as many animals instinctively avoid it. This is important. I can walk into the woods. I know what bear shit smells like. I know to go the other way. Do you know what bear shit smells like? I can walk into a woods and I can tell if a mountain lion has been in the area just by looking at the way, looking up at trees and seeing if they ever climbed, or, I know what the dens look like. I know where to look for the dens. I know all that shit. Do you know that shit? Do you? Really? So this is important. Fire will keep bear away for the most part if you have a good enough fire going. There is no mountain lion that's going to get anywhere near a fire unless they're just plain out starving. They do keep wild animals away. This can make hunting, deer, harder, but hey, whatever. If you're looking for deer for food, but I highly recommend a good roaring fire, okay? Taken together, these functions make fire one of the most valuable tools available in the survival scenario, and that's the truth. It's cold, you need a fire. There's just no way of debating it. If you're not getting shot at or chased or somebody's tracking you, you need a fire. It's that simple. All right. Beyond its practical use, fire plays a critical role in saving energy. The human body generates heat by burning calories. In cold conditions, this process gets kicked in the ass, increasing the demand for energy. If you are building a fire, you don't have to expend as much energy with your body to maintain warmth. Fire reduces this burden by providing external heat source. This allows the body to conserve calories that would otherwise be spent maintaining temperature. See, I just told you that. Why am I telling you again? Your body must maintain core temperatures in extreme cold. A great deal of calories are burned just by trying to keep your arms, legs, and feet and hands warm. I'm talking about from experience. I don't know if you can picture it, but when your body starts to shiver, you're in trouble, all right? And usually by the time your body starts to shiver, your hands and feet are hurting, okay? Shivering, your body's telling you, oh shit, we need heat. That's all that shivering's doing. You shouldn't be trying to make important decisions. You shouldn't be doing anything else. All you should be doing is getting to heat, okay? And if that means sticking your arms up your buddy's, the back of your buddy's shirt to get them warm, you do that. There's no time to be proud. Once you start to shiver out of control, you need to take action. Fire can provide a heat source to those areas that your body itself would not need, so your body itself would not need to burn calories to perform this function. In prolonged survival situations, this conservation can significantly extend the time a person remains functional. When I say functional, I mean cognitive thought processes, like what are we going to do? Where are we going to eat? What are we going to eat? Where are we going to go crap? Things like that. You don't want to be making important decisions if you're already shivering, and it's hard. It's hard to maintain that sense of being and that sense of presence, but you need to think. You need to think before you shiver. You need to think while you're shivering, and basically while you're shivering, you want to maybe hand that thought process off to someone who isn't. Effective fire use requires efficiency. Large fires consume fuel quickly and can be difficult to maintain. However, smaller controlled fires are more sustainable and can provide coffee. Man, that's good coffee. Smaller controlled fires are more sustainable and can provide sufficient heat when properly managed. Techniques such as using reflective surfaces, rocks, logs, or terrain can increase the effectiveness of a fire without increasing fuel consumption. Keep in mind, I type these things up, I read them over and over again, and I still can't get the words out sometimes. I am trying. My preference, if in an extended cold weather situation while I will be remaining in one place, is to build a log wall behind the fire pit with log wings on the side to direct some of the heat. This works so well. Everyone thinks they have to have a shiny metal reflective surface. That's bullshit. If you build a log wall, probably, and you got to know how to do it. You got to use two sticks in the ground, probably about 5 feet high, very stable. You put the logs between the sticks, 2 sticks on each end. You put the logs between the sticks. You want it to be about 4 to 5 feet high. They don't have to be big logs. They just need to be pretty much closed. If you have to, pack some mud in there or something to keep them closed so there's no gaps in them. That will reflect back more heat than you could possibly imagine. If you put wings on the side, the same construction, wings on the side, at a slight angle, so you're forming kind of like the top of a polyhedron, I guess. I don't know how to say it. I can. If somebody wants an email, I can send you an email about how to do it. But you have the wings, so it's containing that heat and directing it back towards you. It's like turning a heater on. It's incredible. It feels wonderful, and that heat starts to come back. It also, you should be looking for hardwood to burn after the fire gets going. Do not, oh my God, this is so hard to get across to people. Do not try to start a fire with hardwood. Avoid it at every cost. Use pine, something soft to start the fire. Even if you have to build a big fire with kindling, don't try to start a fire with hardwood. It just doesn't work. So once it gets going, though, the hardwood burns longer and much hotter. So always have some off to the side. Understanding exposure and heat loss is very important. Exposure is one of the leading causes of death in a survival situation. It occurs when a body loses heat faster than it can produce, resulting in gradual decline in physical and cognitive function. Technically speaking, there are 4 primary mechanisms of heat loss: conduction, convection, radiation, and evaporation. We'll go over these so you understand how to dress properly and why you need to have warm clothing on at all times, if possible. Conduction occurs through direct contact with colder surfaces. Conduction is a major source of conductivity or conductive heat loss, particularly when a person is sitting or lying down. This would be like if you're laying on a rock like an idiot, but hey, who knows? Even cold ground, you can lose heat through conduction very quickly. Convection involves the movement of air or water across the body, which carries heat away. Wind significantly increases convective heat loss and can make otherwise mild temperatures dangerous. Think about it this way: when you get a really bad sunburn and everyone around you is talking about how good the breeze feels at night, and you're shivering out of control because the wind's blowing across that sunburn. Bingo, convection. All right, radiation refers to natural emissions of heat from the body and the surrounding environment. This process occurs continuously regardless of external conditions. Evaporation occurs when moisture on the skin or clothing absorbs heat as it changes from liquid to vapor. This mechanism is particularly dangerous in cold environments, as wet clothing can accelerate heat loss dramatically. Your pack should have a change of underwear and socks, at least one change, if not 2. You're trying to get your skin dry as quickly as possible and keep it dry. Your clothing is going to get wet at some point, no matter what you do. Again, this is a great use for fire as long as you're not falling asleep or standing too close to it. Get that clothing dry. If you have a sleeping bag, get your clothing off and hang it up near the fire. Get it dry. Do not wear wet clothing longer than you have to. Managing heat loss in practice. This is where we're going to put into action things that will keep us from losing more heat than absolutely necessary. Effective survival requires active management of heat loss rather than passive reaction to discomfort. This means working on staying warm, not just immediate relief. In a sleeping situation, insulation from the ground is a primary concern. What did I just talk about? Even a thin layer of natural material such as leaves, grass, branches, or pine needles can significantly reduce conductive heat loss. I would much rather sleep on a bed of pine needles and take a chance with a tick than sleep on gravel or something like that and get frostbite or freeze to death. Protection from wind is equally important. Natural barriers, terrain features, or constructed windbreaks can reduce conductive heat loss or convective heat loss and improve overall thermal stability. So picture a fire is built, burning hardwood. Now picture the log wall reflecting heat back that we previously spoke of. Now take it one step further and picture it about 10 to 15 feet away from a rock wall with you in the middle. This is ideal. For staying warm, this is perfect because that rock wall is going to get warm and reflect heat back again. It can incorporate, if you can incorporate a lean-to into this format, it's even better than you would possibly imagine in freezing cold situations, because you know how frost settles at night. That lean-to would even keep that moisture off of you, so you're in a perfect situation if you can get a lean-to set up in the middle of all this. This is what I would be looking to set up if I was out in the shit. This is what I would do. Moisture management is critical. We talked about that. Wet clothing increases both conductive and evaporative heat loss. Whenever possible, avoid sweating excessively, and dry clothing switch out becomes paramount. Physical activity must be carefully balanced. Yes, you got to cut wood. Yes, you got to do this. Yes, you got to do that. But try to minimize the amount of sweat you produce, because when that sweat gets cold, when the cold permeates the clothing and hits that sweat, that's like walking into a freezer. You're going to really take a lot out of yourself. Shelter is often misunderstood as a construction task rather than a strategic one. The purpose of shelter is not comfort or appearance, but environmental control. Again, what did we just talk about? I told you the ideal situation. An ideal and effective shelter reduces heat loss, blocks wind, and protects against moisture. I just talked about that. These functions are I don't know how I could forget what I wrote. I don't mean to. Well, you know what? Maybe it's better that I do repeat myself. This stuff's important. Effective shelter, like I said, reduces heat loss, blocks wind, and protects against moisture. These functions are far more important than structural complexity or appearance. Again, picture that lean-to I spoke of before. In a tactical situation or just for survival situation, I would take a lean-to over tent any day. Location is the most critical factor. A well-built shelter in a poor location will fail. Ideal locations provide natural wind protection, drainage, and access to resources such as firewood and water, although you don't want to be too close to water. Size is also important. Smaller shelters are more efficient because they retain more heat and require less heat to make comfortable. Larger shelters require more energy to maintain a stable internal temperature. Wow, words are hard today. Orientation should take into account prevailing wind direction and proximity to a fire. Proper positioning can significantly improve the effectiveness of both the shelter and the fire. Shelter should be understood as part of a broader survival system that includes fire, clothing, and terrain. Effective shelters use layering. The outer layer blocks environmental exposure. The inner layer traps heat. Can't get any simpler than that. Natural materials such as leaves, moss, and debris are particularly effective because they trap air, which acts as insulation. I know it sounds like an exaggeration, but the truth is, if you build a good lean-to with a rock wall right behind it and a fire in close proximity with a log wall I talked about, it's going to get probably 75, 80 degrees inside that lean-to as long as you don't have your thing set up with wind tearing through it. Honest to God, it will get that warm. It is that comfortable. You're going to be sitting there in shorts cooking hot dogs, laughing at the cold. But it has to be thought out. You can't just plot. You can't just say, "Oh my God, rock wall, let's build it." Is the wind tearing along the surface of the rock wall? If it is, that's not a good that's not a good situation. You need to think about this. You also have to have good ventilation, okay? You can't have a situation where all the smoke is going to be blowing off the fire into your lean-to. I mean, that's a hell of a thing, die of smoke inhalation. Yeah, he was comfortable, but he suffocated. Think about it, okay? Just think about it. The real danger, something rarely talked about in cold weather training, is damage by large-scale fires. And this is the truth. In the beginning, I talked about people setting themselves on fire, and it sounds far-fetched, but it's not. This happens like in cities, especially in houses where people are trying to stay warm. They're, if you got a gas stove, God bless you, you're good to go. But, you have that oven open, you're trying to heat the house with the oven open. Are you really watching the kids, what they're doing? Are the kids throwing toys in there? Are you going to have a fire out of control before you even know it? Because, G.I. Joe decided to melt and combust. I mean, really, really, you need to take care of that. You need to really watch that. But, in houses where they don't have a gas source, people trying to start a fire in their basement to stay warm, and they didn't think of ventilation, that smoke's got to go somewhere. You'll hear about it. They died, they had a fire, they tried to stay warm, or they were trying to stay warm with a space heater because they had electric, but it got too close to something. Or very commonly, and people don't know it, these freaking idiots that run extension cords under carpet mats and stuff like that. You don't realize it, but walking across that carpet mat wears down the insulation on the wire. And if you're not living in a very clean house, for example, it'll wear it down even quicker because there's dirt under there. But you can start a fire with an extension cord under a carpet just as quick as throwing a match on it, maybe even quicker. You want to, and don't buy into that whole, well, you just need a thicker extension cord. No, you don't put extension cords under carpet ever, period, done. But these space heaters, people get tired of picking them up and them shutting down and cooling down, and then they got to put them down. They'll tape over the safety switch so it always stays on. People put them close to for curtains and don't think about it. People light a bunch of candles, and for some strange reason, they want to put candles in the windows. Curtains go up like kindling. They go up that fast. So think about that. You are in more danger from starting a fire than freezing to death in a lot of situations. A well-organized MAG will have response to cold weather and emergency situations mapped out and somewhat prepared. A well-organized MAG will have already created an alternate position in the event of an emergency, possibly away from a rural setting and in a more wilderness setting. This could be a cleared area of trees and rocks, enough for all members of the MAG to set up lean-tos and fires, a surplus of firewood, or at least enough for the first 24 hours, and have created this in an area within 15-minute walk of water upstream from any low-lying areas. While cold weather survival truly sucks, and I mean sucks, and this is coming from somebody that's done a lot of cold weather training, you can make it a little easier with preparation. It's still going to suck. The whole MAG should be involved in this preparation to become familiar with the area and everything that's involved. I don't want you to teach little kids how to start a fire, and I don't want you to teach, your teenagers that are on the most wanted list how to start a fire, obviously. But if you have responsible kids, 12 and up, maybe teach them how to start a fire in case something happens to you. When I talk about having firewood out in the woods, if you have a big pile of clean firewood, somebody's going to take it, obviously. But if you spread it around in an immediate area, it's not as obvious. It might be there when you get out there. And if it's in a truly rural area, it's not like the deer and the bears are going to steal your wood. So, every year go out there and make a pile of firewood, because at the end of the year, that firewood's going to be useless. But every year, every fall, maybe go out there and cut some wood and start a nice, amount of firewood so you have enough for the first 24 hours. If you want to dig, be smart, really smart about it. You want to put some water, empty water bottle, the water bags, and maybe some canned food in a watertight case and stuff like that. Dig a hole and put it in. It's less you got to carry to get out there. This is extreme preparation, extreme situation, but there's an old Marine Corps saying, it's more important in this situation than any, because it tends to get overlooked, or people think it's an exaggeration. But in a survival situation with survival supplies, I'd rather be looking at them than looking for them. So you decide what's important. You decide. It's all up to you. But if you are leading a MAG, it's your responsibility. If you are leading your family, it's your responsibility. If there's something happens to you, if you break your arm and you only got one arm, your chances of starting a fire are going to be a little bit diminished. Now if you have a lighter and you have fire starting material, you're good to go. But if you don't, you should have somebody that can step up and make that fire. Survival, this is in conclusion. Survival is ultimately a matter of maintaining energy. Really, that's what it boils down to. The body must maintain its core temperature, hot or cold, and all survival strategies support that objective. That's what it's all about. In survival, if your body gets too hot or too cold, your cognitive thought process go right out the window, and you might as well be burning your MREs and pouring your water out in the woods, because you're going to start making some really, really bad decisions if you cannot maintain core temperature. And the longer the time goes on that you can't, the worse your decisions are going to get. Rather than focusing solely on tools or equipment, individuals should prioritize understanding the principles that govern survival. This knowledge allows for adaptation across a wide range of scenarios, even in the absence of ideal resources. That's why we're talking about, you learn how to use a ferro rod. Me, I'd rather have 3 lighters. 1 fails, okay, 2 fails. I still got the 3rd one and a ferro rod. In this way, preparedness becomes less about predicting specific events and more about developing the ability to respond effectively to any situation. Now, when I talk about going out, I'm just adding this at the end. When I talk about going out and training, maybe the first time you do it, you make it a little bit more about fun with the kids. Don't make it like they're in a stalag or gulag or whatever the hell it's called in Russia. Maybe make it a little more entertaining, especially the learning, the learning how to do things. You give them a big pat on the back, but you have to follow that with the truth. You have to tell them now in real training or in a real situation, it's not going to be like this. You're going to have to get the fire going first try if possible. It's pressure, but you got to manage it. Maybe make it, the first time they get to use their cold weather bag, let them see just how warm it'll keep them even in cold weather. So they understand, they have faith in their equipment. They know this is especially important with your spouses, be it a male or a female. They need to have confidence in the equipment. It's extremely important for them to buy in. So it's up to you. How effective do you want to be in an extreme cold situation? Do you want to be fighting uphill every decision you have to make for the mag and fighting uphill to have everyone in the mag believe it? Or do you want to show them some confidence and let them already know, because they practiced it, that you know what you're doing and you can get this done? And even if you have to learn it together, that's a beautiful thing. Learn it together. Everybody helping each other out. That's what a mag's about. So I know it's late for cold weather training, and I'm sorry. I'm really sorry this came this late, but we're in the crisis series, so I thought I'd hit it first while there's still some cold weather left. Guys. Guys and gals, watch your 6. 3 lighters, not just a ferro rod. And peace out.